A human soldier risked his heart and his life to save the alien queen's daughter, and what he received in return shocked everyone. The battlefield on Carrion 4 was nothing like the deserts or forests Sergeant Daniel Reeves had trained him back on Earth. The sky here shimmered violet, threaded with streaks of gold lightning that never touched the ground. The soil was a dark, glassy crust that cracked under his boots, releasing faint plumes of phosphorescent dust. Every step felt like trespassing in a world that wanted nothing to do with humans. Daniel had been deployed with the U.S. Expeditionary Forces as part of a peacekeeping mission. Or at least, that was the official statement. Everyone knew it was a war disguised as diplomacy. Humans had clashed with the Karani, a proud alien civilization ruled by queens whose bloodlines stretched back thousands of years. Their appearance was otherworldly, pale as ivory, with long, flowing hair, so white it caught the light like liquid frost. Their eyes, large and luminous, seemed to hold more galaxies than the sky above. And now Daniel, a soldier from Alabama who had once dreamed of nothing more than flying helicopters, found himself in the middle of a burned-out village on a planet that wasn't supposed to know war anymore. The mission had gone wrong, terribly wrong. What began as a routine patrol had turned into chaos when rogue mercenaries attacked. Smoke rose from shattered buildings carved into the black rock, the screams of civilians echoing through the thin, alien air. Daniel and his squad had scattered, overwhelmed by the ambush. He didn't know if any of his men were alive. All he knew was that his rifle was nearly out of charge, and his chest ached with the hollow rhythm of fear. Then he heard it, a cry, high-pitched, trembling, cutting through the carnage. Not the cry of a soldier, but of a child. Daniel froze. The rational part of his brain screamed, "Stay low. Survive. Don't get killed for nothing." But something else pulled at him, something deeper. He turned toward the sound and moved, crouching between collapsed stone arches and scorched alien banners. The cry came again, closer this time. He followed it until he reached the ruins of what might have been a temple, its walls etched with silver patterns that glowed faintly even in ruin. Inside, half buried beneath rubble, was a small figure, a child. Her skin was the same pale white as the stories described, her hair a cascade of silver snow tangled with dust and blood. Her eyes, impossibly large, shimmering like pools of crystal light, locked onto him with pure terror. The daughter of the queen. He didn't need a briefing to recognize her. Every soldier had seen images. The heir, the little princess of Carrion. Her abduction or death would shatter the fragile truce and plunge both species into endless war. And here she was, alone, helpless. Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Hey," he whispered, though she couldn't possibly understand English. He lowered his rifle, raising his hands slowly in the universal gesture of peace. "I'm not going to hurt you," she whimpered, shrinking back, but the rubble pinned her small legs. The building creaked ominously, chunks of ceiling threatening to collapse. Daniel didn't think. He acted. He slung his rifle across his back, shoved debris aside with his bare hands, ignoring the sharp edges slicing his palms. The girl cried out as the rubble shifted, but he pressed on, gritting his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes. Finally, with one last heave, he freed her. She gasped, trembling, but before either could move, the temple gave a final groan. A massive slab broke loose above them. Daniel lunged, scooping her into his arms. He threw himself forward just as the slab crashed down, the impact sending tremors through the ground. Dust and sparks filled the air. His ears rang, but he was alive. She was alive. She clung to him, tiny fingers digging into the fabric of his armor. Her heartbeat thudded against his chest, frantic, terrified, but undeniably real. Daniel staggered out of the ruins, coughing, carrying her close. For a moment, the war seemed distant, the world reduced to just the two of them. Then came the sound of boots. Heavy, mechanical, not human. Daniel turned sharply, shielding the child. Out of the smoke emerged the mercenaries, hulking figures in stolen armor, their visors glowing red. They had been searching for her. Of course they had. And now they saw him. A human soldier cradling the most precious being on this planet. "Shit," Daniel muttered. He had no backup, no cover, and his rifle had only a few charges left. Every calculation screamed that this was a death sentence. But the girl trembled in his arms, her small hands clinging to his armor with desperate trust. And Daniel realized something with startling clarity. He could not, would not, abandon her. "All right then," he said under his breath, setting his jaw. "We'll do this my way." The mercenaries raised their weapons, metallic clicks echoing across the ruined street. Daniel shifted the girl to his back, securing her with his gear straps so his arms were free. She whimpered but held on, burying her face against him. Daniel raised his rifle. The HUD blinked low power. He had maybe 3 shots left. 3 against 6 armored enemies. No odds at all. But Sergeant Reeves had been through worse. Afghanistan. The ice storms in Alaska. The crash in orbit. He knew fear. He knew hopeless fights. And he knew that sometimes the difference between surviving and dying was the willingness to step forward anyway. The first mercenary fired. Daniel dove aside, rolling, returning a shot that burned through the attacker's chest plate. "One down." The girl cried out, but he whispered over his shoulder, "It's okay, I've got you." Another blast scorched past, nearly searing his leg. Daniel sprinted between cover, firing again. 2 down. Sparks lit the air, the violet sky rumbling with distant thunder. His heart pounded like a war drum, each breath ragged. He was running on instinct now, pure survival and the raw determination not to let this child fall. When the last of his rifle charges burned out, only 2 mercenaries remained. They advanced, weapons humming. Daniel's chest tightened. No more ammo. No more options. Except one. He drew his combat knife. Steel, sharp, nothing fancy. He'd trained with it 1,000 times, but never thought it would be his last line against armored aliens. He crouched, every muscle tensed. "Come on," he growled. They came, and Daniel met them head on. The fight was chaos. Dust, blood, the clang of metal. Pain lanced through him as a strike grazed his ribs, but adrenaline kept him moving. He slashed, parried, shoved, fought like a man with nothing to lose. And when at last the last mercenary collapsed in a heap of sparks and silence, Daniel stood swaying, chest heaving, knife dripping. His body screamed with exhaustion. His vision blurred, but the girl was safe, still clinging to him, still breathing. Daniel felt his knees, holding her close. The battlefield was silent now, only the strange sky watching overhead. He didn't know what would happen next, whether reinforcements would come, whether he'd even live another hour. But in that moment, none of it mattered. He had saved her. Against every odd, he had saved her. The silence after the fight felt heavier than the battle itself. Daniel knelt in the ash and fractured stone, his chest rising and falling in harsh, uneven breaths. The child clung to his neck, refusing to let go. Her white hair was tangled with soot, her pale skin smeared with streaks of alien dust, but her eyes, those luminous, crystalline eyes, still held a fragile spark of hope. He wasn't sure what surprised him more, that he was still alive, or that she trusted him enough to hold on. A tremor rolled across the broken village, the ground shuddering beneath his knees. Daniel raised his head, scanning the horizon. In the distance, a column of light pierced the violet sky, followed by the roar of alien craft engines. Reinforcements, though he didn't know whose. Human? Karani? More mercenaries? "Stay with me, kid," he murmured, adjusting her grip so she was secure against his back again. "I'll get you out of here." But every direction was hostile. The battlefield stretched for miles, littered with burned wreckage and collapsing alien structures. Somewhere out there, the rest of his squad might be alive, but radio contact was still dead. His comms hissed with static whenever he tried. He stumbled toward the remnants of an alley carved into the obsidian-like stone. His legs were heavy, his ribs aching where armor had cracked, but he forced himself forward. Each step felt like it might be his last, yet the thought of stopping never crossed his mind. Stopping meant death, for both of them. As he moved, the girl began whispering softly. At first, Daniel thought it was fear, maybe prayer. Then he realized she was speaking to him, in her own language. He couldn't understand the words, but her tone carried something beyond fear. Gratitude? A plea? "Sorry, kid," he muttered. English only. She didn't understand, of course. But when he glanced back, her gaze was locked on him with an intensity that shook him. Not just fear, trust. Daniel gritted his teeth. He hadn't earned that trust yet. He was just a grunt with blood on his hands, dragged into a war too big for him. But if this little alien princess believed in him, then hell, he'd fight to deserve it. The first true sign of trouble came at the edge of the ruins. Figures emerged, Karani soldiers, their armor far more elegant and regal than the mercenaries. The pale glow of their uniforms pulsed with soft blue veins of light, each movement precise, almost ritualistic. Their weapons hummed with restrained energy. Daniel froze, raising his hands slowly. "Easy," he muttered, even though they couldn't understand. "I'm not the bad guy here." The child clung tighter to him, her tiny voice breaking into sharp words directed at the soldiers. Their expressions shifted, shock, then recognition. Their eyes widened as they realized who she was. The air. Their weapons lowered instantly. One soldier dropped to a knee, pressing his hand over his chest in a gesture Daniel assumed was reverence. The others followed. Then their gazes snapped back to him. Hard, suspicious. Daniel's gut tightened. He could imagine what they saw. A human soldier, armed and bloodied, holding the princess of their people. To them, he might look like a kidnapper. A threat. Great, Daniel muttered under his breath. Any second now, I'm dead. The girl tugged on his collar, whispering urgently. Then, in a trembling voice, she spoke one word in broken English. Safe. The soldiers froze. Daniel blinked. Did she just... Safe, she repeated, louder this time, pointing at him with her small hand. Her voice cracked, but there was no mistaking the meaning. She was vouching for him. The soldiers exchanged glances, their pale eyes reflecting the stormy light of the sky. Then, slowly one approached. He extended his hand, palm outward, a gesture Daniel recognized as a request. Daniel hesitated. Every instinct told him not to let go. But the girl pressed her forehead briefly to his armor before loosening her grip. Reluctantly, he let the soldier take her. The relief was short-lived. Another sound filled the air, an all-too-familiar whine. Human dropships. Daniel turned sharply as sleek, angular ships broke through the clouds, descending fast. His chest clenched. Reinforcements. His own people. Normally, that would have been salvation. But now, with the princess in alien hands, and him standing bloodied beside them, he saw exactly how this would look. The Karani soldiers realized it too. Their weapons came up again, aimed not at the child, but at the sky. Daniel could almost taste the hostility building between the two sides. One wrong move, and this shattered truce would ignite in a war right here, right now. He stepped forward quickly, raising both hands high, shouting toward the dropships. Hold your fire. Friendly. Don't shoot. The comms in his helmet crackled. Finally, a voice. Sergeant Reeves, stand down. We have you on visual. Repeat, stand down. Daniel exhaled in relief, then froze as the voice continued. Orders are to secure the alien air. Do not resist. His stomach dropped. Secure, not rescue. His own command didn't trust him either. The dropships deployed a squad of armored marines, weapons glinting under the violet sky. The Karani soldiers bristled. The princess clutched tighter in their arms, her eyes wide with panic. Daniel found himself standing between them, between his people and theirs. And in that instant, he knew, if he stepped aside, the girl would be taken. To a lab, a cell, a bargaining chip. She'd never see freedom again. He should obey. He was a soldier. Orders were orders. But the child's earlier words still echoed in his mind. Safe. She had chosen him, trusted him, believed in him when no one else would. And if he betrayed that trust now, what kind of man would he be? Daniel tightened his grip on his empty rifle, his heart pounding like thunder. For the first time, he understood the real conflict wasn't between species or armies. It was inside him, between obedience and humanity, between survival and honor. And he had to choose. The violet sky burned with the glare of drop ships. Dust and ash swirled in the turbulence as human marines descended on repulsor packs, rifles aimed with cold precision. Opposite them, the Karani soldiers braced, their sleek weapons glowing with restrained fury. The little girl clutched against her guardian's chest, turned her luminous eyes toward Daniel, silently pleading for safety. He was caught between two armies, his own and theirs, and both saw him as a liability. "Sergeant Reeves," the voice barked through his comms, sharp and commanding. "Stand down immediately. Do not interfere with the recovery of the asset." Asset. The words slammed into him like a bullet. Not child, not heir, not person, just a bargaining chip. Daniel's gut twisted. He glanced back at the princess. Her white hair fluttered in the wind, her tiny fingers still reaching subtly for him despite being held in alien arms. She didn't understand the politics, the orders, the lies. All she knew was that one human soldier had risked everything to save her, and she expected him to keep her safe. The Marines advanced, armored boots pounding across the fractured ground. The Karani raised their weapons in a deadly semicircle, murmuring in their own tongue, their pale eyes burning with distrust. One wrong twitch would ignite the entire field into a slaughterhouse. Daniel raised his hands. "Everybody stop. You fire here, and you'll start a war we can't walk back from." The lead Marine ignored him. His visor glowed as he fixed on the princess. Target confirmed. "Prepare containment." The Karani captain hissed something guttural and drew a blade of light from his hip. The weapon hummed like a living thing, casting a cold glow on his armor. His warriors mirrored him, forming a protective wall around their queen's daughter. Daniel's pulse hammered. If the first shots came, they wouldn't stop until the entire village was ash and bone. Think, Reeves. Think fast. He did the only thing that made sense in the insanity. He moved forward, right into the no man's land between the two sides. "Sergeant, back away," the Marine snapped. "No," Daniel said, voice steady despite the roar of his heart. He lifted his cracked helmet free and tossed it aside, exposing his face. Dust streaked his skin, blood smeared his jaw, but his eyes were unwavering. "She's a child, not an asset, and you fire on them. You're not just killing soldiers, you're killing any chance of peace." The comm channel went silent. Then, chillingly calm, "Reeves, you're out of line. Final warning." The Karani captain's gaze shifted to Daniel, assessing him. For a moment, the air itself seemed to pause, as though the planet were holding its breath. The princess squirmed in the alien soldier's grip, reaching her tiny hand out toward Daniel again. That gesture, simple, desperate, ignited something primal in him. He couldn't walk away. Not now. He turned back toward his own. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The words fell like stones into the silence. The Marines hesitated, their formation faltering. None of them wanted to shoot one of their own. Not yet. But hesitation wouldn't last forever. Orders always won in the end. Then the first shot rang out. Neither human nor Karani. From the ruins beyond, a new group emerged. The mercenaries weren't all dead. Reinforcements, bristling with scavenged weapons and armor. They opened fire indiscriminately, bolts of plasma searing the air, striking both Marines and Karani alike. Chaos exploded. Daniel dove as a blast scorched the ground where he'd stood. The Karani shoved the princess behind them, shielding her with their bodies. Marines shouted over comms, returning fire. In seconds, the fragile standoff shattered into a three-way bloodbath. Daniel scrambled across the rubble, ducking behind a half-collapsed wall. His rifle was dead weight, empty. His knife was still slick from the earlier fight. He had no real weapons, no plan, just raw determination. Through the storm of fire, he saw her again. The girl, crouched behind the Karani, eyes wide with terror. She wasn't safe. Not with bullets and plasma tearing the world apart around her. Daniel's decision was instant. He burst from cover, sprinting through the storm. A Marine shouted his name, but he didn't stop. A mercenary swung his rifle toward him. Daniel slammed into him shoulder first, the impact breaking bone, driving the alien into the dirt. He kept running, lungs burning, until he reached the princess. The Karani captain blocked his way, blade raised in warning. Daniel didn't flinch. He pointed to the child, then at the mercenaries flooding in. "Protecting her together is the only chance we've got," he shouted. The captain's blade hovered inches from his chest. Then, slowly, the weapon lowered. In a single swift motion, he thrust the child back into Daniel's arms. The message was clear. If you fail, you die. Daniel clutched her tight and turned just as another blast ripped past. He dove into cover, shielding her with his body. Dust rained down. Smoke choked the air. Screams filled his ears. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was responsibility. He whispered into her hair, though she couldn't understand. I've got you. I promise. The battle raged on. Marines pushed forward. Karani held the line. Mercenaries circled like wolves. Daniel moved through the chaos with one singular focus: keep the child alive. Each second felt stolen, each breath a gamble. But even as he fought, he knew the truth. Saving her once had been hard. Saving her again and again would be impossible. Unless he found a way to end the conflict, they would both be swallowed by it. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel realized the cost. To protect her, he might have to betray everyone: his orders, his comrades, even his own species. The battlefield had collapsed into pure madness. Smoke and plasma fire painted the ruins in shifting colors of red and blue. The air smelled of scorched metal and burnt ozone, every explosion shaking the alien soil. Marines shouted orders. Karani warriors chanted their battle cries, and mercenaries laughed as they tore into both sides without care for who lived or died. Daniel's world narrowed to the girl in his arms. Her body was trembling, but her grip on his armor was iron. She buried her face against his chest, trusting blindly that he could protect her, even as the world shattered around them. That trust was heavier than any rifle. A blast ripped the wall beside him apart, showering him with shards of obsidian stone. Daniel dove, rolling behind a broken arch. His chest burned, his ribs ached, but he forced himself upright. Through the smoke, he saw the Marine squad regrouping, pushing toward his position. Target is compromised. Retrieve the air. Neutralize non-compliant asset. The words echoed in his helmet comm before he ripped the device free, tossing it aside. They weren't his squad anymore. Not if they saw her as a prize. Not if they saw him as expendable. The Karani were faltering. Their line bent under the mercenary assault, bodies falling with cries that pierced the storm. The captain fought like a blade of fire, cutting down mercenaries with ruthless precision. But even he was staggering under the weight of numbers. Daniel looked from one side to the other, his people advancing with cold efficiency, the Karani bleeding to protect their princess, and realized there was no middle ground left. If he hesitated, she'd be swallowed by either cage, dissected by his command, or buried with her people. God damn it, he muttered, tightening his grip on her tiny form. The choice wasn't rational. It wasn't even survival. It was raw, human instinct. He broke cover, sprinting not toward his Marines, not toward safety, but toward the crumbling ruins that led deeper into the alien city. Reeves, stand down. Gunfire erupted behind him, bolts sizzling past. Daniel ducked and wove through collapsing structures, shards raining from above. The girl whimpered, clutching tighter. He whispered against her hair, I've got you, kid. Hang on. Every step was rebellion. Every heartbeat, treason. But he didn't care. Orders had become chains, and he cut them loose. The ruins opened into what must have once been a grand plaza. Statues carved from shimmering stone stood cracked and broken, their faces lost to time. At the far end, a collapsed spire jutted into the sky like a broken spear. Daniel stumbled toward it, lungs heaving. He needed cover, a place to regroup, to think. The mercenaries were spreading, hunting, and the Marines would follow the trail. He couldn't fight them all. Not like this. Then, from the shadows of the spire, the Karani captain emerged, armor scorched, blade flickering weakly. His pale eyes locked onto Daniel. For a heartbeat, silence hung. Daniel set his jaw. If you're here to kill me, do it fast. But she's not leaving my arms. The captain didn't move. His gaze shifted to the child, then back to Daniel. Slowly, he spoke in his tongue. Low, harsh syllables Daniel couldn't understand. But the meaning was clear enough when he lowered his blade and gestured deeper into the ruins. Daniel hesitated. You want me to follow you? The captain repeated the gesture, more urgent this time. Daniel swallowed. He didn't trust the alien. Not fully. But he trusted even less the Marines closing in from behind. And the girl, her tiny hand clutching at his chest plate, seemed to calm when her eyes landed on the captain. All right, Daniel said. Lead the way. They slipped through the shadows, weaving into narrow corridors of glassy stone. The further they went, The thicker the silence became, broken only by distant echoes of war. Finally, they reached a hidden chamber, lit by a pale blue glow emanating from the walls themselves. Strange symbols shimmered faintly across the stone, pulsing like a heartbeat. The captain turned sharply, speaking again, this time pointing at Daniel's chest. His tone was accusing, his expression burning with suspicion. Daniel bristled. I don't know what you're saying, all right? But I didn't hurt her. I saved her. Twice. The girl squirmed in his arms, then wriggled free enough to speak. She pressed a tiny hand to her chest and said something soft in her language. The captain froze. Then, shockingly, the child turned to Daniel and whispered one word in broken English again. Father. Daniel's breath caught. What? The captain's eyes widened. His grip on his blade faltered. The girl repeated the word, clearer this time, pointing at Daniel. Father. Safe. Daniel's chest tightened. He wasn't her father, of course. But in her mind, in this chaos, he had become the one figure who embodied protection, safety, love. The captain exhaled sharply, lowering his weapon completely. He muttered something that sounded almost reverent. Before Daniel could respond, a thunderous explosion rocked the chamber. The wall behind them cracked, a blast tearing it open. Marines poured in, weapons raised. Daniel spun, instinct driving him to shield the girl. The captain stepped forward, blade humming weakly, ready to defend. But they were outnumbered, outgunned. The Marine commander's voice boomed. Sergeant Reeves, surrender the alien child. This is your final chance. Daniel's heart hammered. He looked at the girl, trembling but unbroken in his arms. He looked at the Marines, faceless behind their visors. And then at the captain, who had once been his enemy, but now stood beside him in defiance. Something inside him snapped. No, Daniel said, his voice carrying more force than the chaos around them. She's not yours to take. Not while I'm breathing. The Marine stiffened. Weapons shifted. And in that moment, Daniel knew the path ahead. He would fight his own kind if he had to. For her. For what was right. The girl pressed her forehead against his armor again, whispering the word that now bound him tighter than any oath. Safe. That was the moment everything changed. Daniel Reeves, soldier of the United States, had just turned his back on orders, on his chain of command, and maybe even on his entire species, for the sake of one alien child, and a queen whose wrath or mercy would shake the galaxy. And if you've ever rooted for an impossible love, for a bond forged in fire and defiance, you know this is only the beginning. If you've ever cheered for an impossible love, subscribe to the channel. There's much more to come. The silence that followed Daniel's defiance was short-lived. The Marines didn't lower their rifles. If anything, the air thickened with the hum of charged weapons. Daniel's pulse thudded in his ears as he adjusted his grip on the girl, his knife his only weapon. The Karani captain beside him raised his flickering blade, his pale eyes set with grim determination. Reeves, the Marine commander barked, "You're making a mistake. Hand over the air. You can still walk away from this alive." Daniel's jaw tightened. His answer came without hesitation. She's not a lab specimen. She's a child. If I hand her to you, she'll never be safe. The commander's visor tilted, unreadable. You've gone rogue. Don't make us put you down. The girl whimpered softly, clutching Daniel's chest. He bent his head briefly, whispering to her though she couldn't understand. Don't worry, kid. I won't let them touch you. Then the first shot rang out. The chamber erupted. Daniel dove behind a half-fallen pillar, shielding the princess as bolts of plasma chewed through the stone. The Karani captain lunged forward, his blade singing as it clashed against Marine rifles, sparks scattering like fireflies. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't win a straight fight. They had numbers, training, firepower. But maybe he didn't need to win, to survive long enough to escape. He scanned the chamber. The cracked wall behind them still opened into the ruins beyond. A path. Dangerous, but better than waiting to be cornered. He caught the captain's eye. Cover me. The alien didn't understand the words, but when Daniel pointed toward the opening, the captain snarled and surged forward, cutting a swath through the Marines. Daniel ran. He clutched the girl close and sprinted through the debris, ducking as plasma bolts scorched the air above him. His lungs burned, his legs screamed, but he didn't stop. He barreled through the shattered wall and into the labyrinthine streets of the alien city. The night, Air hit him like ice, carrying the acrid stench of smoke. Behind him, shouts echoed, boots pounding in pursuit. The Karani captain emerged seconds later, blood streaking his pale armor, his blade flickering but still deadly. They ran together, two enemies bound by circumstance, protecting the same child. They didn't stop until the ruins gave way to a canyon split into jagged ridges of black stone. The alien stars shimmered overhead, constellations Daniel didn't recognize. His chest heaved, every breath fire. He lowered the girl to the ground gently, checking her over. She was shaken, her white hair tangled, but alive. She clung to his hand with surprising strength. The captain spoke harshly, his words sharp as blades. Daniel shook his head. I don't understand you. He pointed to the girl. She stays with me. Safe. For a long moment, the alien studied him, his expression unreadable. Then he lowered his blade and knelt before the girl, pressing his forehead lightly to hers. She touched his cheek in return, whispering something soft. The captain's shoulders sagged, as though her touch had washed away the last of his suspicion. Daniel exhaled, sinking against the canyon wall. His entire body ached. His mind screamed for rest, but rest wasn't an option. He had disobeyed orders, turned his back on his own. There was no going back now. The girl tugged at his sleeve. He looked down to see her pointing at the stars. She whispered a word, strange, musical. He wished he understood. Then, faintly on the horizon, light bloomed. Not fire, not battle, something more controlled. A signal. The captain stiffened. He murmured a word that even Daniel caught. Renee. The Queen. By dawn, they reached the outskirts of what remained of a Karani stronghold. Towers of pale stone rose like frozen spires, cracked but still majestic. Alien banners fluttered weakly in the wind, marked with silver glyphs. Soldiers lined the path as Daniel approached, their weapons trained, but their movements hesitant. Whispers rippled through them as they saw the girl in his arms alive. The Karani captain strode ahead, raising his voice in a commanding shout. The soldiers parted reluctantly, and then she appeared. The Queen. She descended the steps of the ruined citadel with the grace of someone born to rule. Her skin was alabaster, her long white hair cascading like silk, her eyes luminous pools of light that seemed to pierce straight through him. Unlike the warriors, she wore no armor, only flowing silver garments that shimmered as if woven from starlight itself. Daniel froze. His throat tightened. The girl wriggled in his arms and cried out, reaching toward her mother. The Queen's composure cracked for the first time as she hurried forward, gathering her daughter into her embrace. She whispered in their tongue, voice trembling, clutching the child as if she'd never let go again. Daniel stepped back, suddenly uncertain. His role here was over, wasn't it? He'd done his part. She was safe. But the Queen's eyes found him. She rose, still holding her daughter, and walked toward him. Soldiers tensed, their weapons lifting slightly, but she raised a single hand and they obeyed instantly. Up close, her presence was overwhelming. Her gaze swept over him, his battered armor, his blood-stained hands, his exhausted eyes. She said something in her tongue, her voice low, musical but firm. I don't understand, Daniel admitted, his voice hoarse. To his shock, she switched to halting English. You saved her. Daniel blinked. Yeah, I did. Her eyes narrowed, as though measuring the weight of his soul. Why? The question cut deeper than he expected. Why had he turned on his own orders, risked his life again and again? The answer rose without thought. Because she's just a kid, he said softly. Because no one deserves to be treated like property. Not her. Not anyone. The Queen studied him for a long, silent moment. Then, slowly, she inclined her head, a gesture of respect, of acknowledgement. Her soldiers shifted uneasily, exchanging glances. Some looked at Daniel with suspicion, others with grudging admiration. The captain who had fought beside him stepped forward, speaking quickly in their tongue. The Queen listened, her expression unreadable, then turned back to Daniel. You, our enemy, she said carefully. But you are protector. Daniel had no words. The Queen looked down at her daughter, then back at him. For this, human soldier, you are owed. Those words struck him harder than any bullet. Owed, not thanked. Not dismissed. Owed. He didn't know what that meant yet, what form it would take, but the weight of it hung heavy in the air. Behind him, distant thunder rolled. Dropships. His people weren't done. They'd come again. They hunt him, brand him traitor, demand the girl. And now he wasn't just protecting her. He was bound to her mother, the queen of a civilization at war with his own. The consequences had only begun. The first light of dawn spilled across the alien city's broken skyline, painting the pale stone towers in hues of rose and gold. The ruins might have once been glorious, but now they bore the scars of war. Shattered spires, crumbled bridges, blackened scorch marks that spoke of battles Daniel could barely imagine. Inside the citadel's great hall, Daniel stood awkwardly, surrounded by a sea of luminous eyes. Alien soldiers lined the walls, their alabaster skin and flowing white hair making them appear almost ethereal, like living statues carved from frost. At the far end, upon a dais carved with spiraling glyphs, the queen sat with her daughter nestled safely at her side. Daniel's presence was a disruption. A human in battered armor, blood-stained and exhausted, clutching his helmet under one arm, as though it might shield him from the stares that pierced him from every direction. He knew what they saw: an intruder, a killer, a sworn enemy. But he also knew what he had done. He had carried their future in his arms, defying everything he had been trained to obey. The queen spoke first, her English slow but deliberate. "You saved her. You defied your own kind." Daniel nodded. "I didn't have a choice. Orders or not, I couldn't let them hurt her." A murmur rippled through the gathered aliens, sharp and suspicious. One of the elder warriors stepped forward, his voice rising in protest in their native tongue. The queen lifted a hand, silencing him without even glancing in his direction. Her eyes, strange, luminous, and unreadable, remained fixed on Daniel. "You are traitor to your people now." The word landed heavy. He swallowed. "Yeah, yes I am." Silence stretched. The weight of what he had admitted was not lost on either side. He had cut ties with his own, made himself an exile in a single night. And here he was, standing before the queen of those he had once been sent to fight. The queen rose from her seat, her gown catching the light like liquid silver. With her daughter still clutching her hand, she descended the steps toward him. Every soldier in the room stiffened. Daniel held his ground. When she reached him, she studied his face as though searching for cracks in the armor of his resolve. Then she said, carefully, "For what you have done, you may remain. You are guest." The word felt strange on her tongue, and stranger still in his ears. Guest. Not prisoner. Not enemy. Guest. Daniel lowered his head, slightly in acknowledgement. "Thank you." The queen's daughter, peeking from behind her mother's gown, reached out and touched his hand. Her pale fingers were tiny, trembling, but warm. She spoke a word in her own language, soft, innocent. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew its weight. Trust. Days passed. The humans did not attack again immediately, though the threat hung like a storm on the horizon. Daniel remained within the citadel, under constant watch. At first, he was treated with suspicion. Soldiers shadowed his every step. Conversations ceased when he entered a room. Yet slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. He helped where he could, hauling supplies, carrying water, even assisting in repairing one of the broken gates. His training as a soldier lent him strength and discipline, and though the aliens never thanked him aloud, their wary glances began to soften. It was the child who broke the walls first. She sought him out constantly, tugging on his hand, dragging him to watch as she played among the marble courtyards. She laughed at him when he stumbled over alien words she tried to teach him, her silver hair catching the light as her giggles echoed off the stone. The queen often watched these moments in silence. Her face remained composed, but her eyes betrayed something deeper, an emotion caught between gratitude and curiosity. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the ruined towers, Daniel found himself summoned to the queen's private chamber. The room was vast and open, its walls inscribed with glowing glyphs that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. The air was cool, carrying the scent of unfamiliar blossoms. She stood by the window, her white hair shimmering in the moonlight. Without turning, she spoke. "Your people will come again." Daniel stepped closer, his boots echoing softly on the polished stone. "I know, you will fight them." Her tone was not mocking, but genuinely questioning. He hesitated. "If I have to, but I won't fight for them anymore. Not after what they've done." The queen turned then, her gaze locking onto his. "You would fight for us?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Daniel exhaled slowly. He thought of the girl's laughter, the way she clung to his hand. He thought of the Marines raising their rifles, ready to kill without hesitation. He thought of the orders that had nearly damned child. "Yes," he said finally, "I'd fight for you." For a long time, neither spoke. Then, to his surprise, the queen's expression softened. Her voice lowered, almost a whisper. "You are human, and yet you see us." Daniel didn't know how to answer. He simply held her gaze. The connection between them grew, fragile but undeniable. They spoke often, stumbling through halting English and gestures, trading words in their respective tongues. Daniel learned that her name was Lasara, and her daughter's name was Elira. He learned that their people, the Karani, once spanned half the stars before the war had driven them to the edge of extinction. In return, she pressed him about Earth, about its oceans and forests, its vast cities, its fractured humanity. He told her of the deserts of Nevada, where he had trained under the relentless sun. He told her of the laughter of children back home, not so different from Elira's. The more they spoke, the more the walls crumbled. And yet, danger loomed. Scouts reported human dropships moving closer. Supplies dwindled. The citadel was a sanctuary, but could not hold forever. One night, as Daniel stood on the balcony overlooking the ruined city, Lasara joined him. She wore no crown, no armor, only a simple gown that caught the moonlight. For the first time, she did not look like a queen. She looked human. "They will come soon," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Then we'll be ready." She studied him, her pale eyes luminous. "You speak as if you are one of us now." He glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe I am." For the first time, Lasara smiled. It was small, fleeting but real. And in that moment, beneath alien moons on a broken world, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding deeper than words, fragile yet unbreakable. Daniel Reeves, soldier of Earth, traitor to his own, had found something unexpected in the ruins of war. Not just a cause worth fighting for, but a bond that reached across the gulf of species, culture, and history. A bond that would be tested by the fires to come. The night was split open by fire. It began with a low hum, like the sky itself was trembling. Then the hum became a roar, and the roar became thunder as human dropships tore through the atmosphere. Flames streaked across the heavens, illuminating the shattered city in red. From the citadel's balconies, the Karani watched in silence, their pale faces bathed in the glow of impending war. Daniel stood among them, rifle in hand, heart pounding. He had seen this sight before, human warships descending like vultures. But this time, they were not salvation. They were the executioners. The alarm bells of the citadel wailed, echoing off broken towers. Soldiers rushed to their posts. The great gates of the stronghold rumbled shut, sealing with ancient glyphs that flared like molten veins. Daniel turned toward Lasara. She stood at the center of the hall, her daughter clutched against her side, her expression carved from steel. She no longer looked fragile. She was every inch the queen, commanding, unshaken, a beacon for her people in their darkest hour. "Where will they strike?" Daniel demanded. One of her generals replied in clipped English. "They come from the east. A full squadron. Armor, weapons, fire to burn us all." Daniel's stomach twisted. He had trained with those men once, bled with them. He knew their tactics, their ruthlessness, and he knew what they wanted. "They'll head straight for the throne room. They'll want you," and the girl. Lasara's eyes flicked toward him, searching. "And you?" Daniel tightened his grip on the rifle. "I'll be right here." The first blast hit like a meteor. The ground shook, ancient stone collapsing in a rain of dust and fire. The gates buckled, glowing glyphs flickering as the assault tore at their defenses. Karani soldiers answered with energy bolts that lit the night in bursts of sapphire light. Arrows of pure plasma arced across the sky, striking dropships and sending them spiraling into the ruins below. But the humans pressed forward, relentless. Armor suits pounded across the battlefield, weapons blazing. Explosions ripped open courtyards. Marble shattered. Statues crumbled. The air filled with screams. Daniel fought at the walls, shoulder to shoulder with Karani warriors. His rifle barked fire, tearing into soldiers he had once called brothers. Each trigger pull burned in his chest. Each fallen Marine was a memory. Yet he did not falter, because behind him, in the heart of the citadel, stood Lysara and Elira, and he would not let them fall. The breach came at midnight. A squad of armored Marines burst through the sundered gate, their visors glowing crimson. Daniel recognized the insignia painted on their pauldrons, the same unit he had once served. For a heartbeat, his chest clenched. Then the firefight consumed him. Bolts of energy seared past his face. He rolled behind a shattered pillar, returning fire with sharp bursts. A Marine went down, armor sparking, helmet cracking. Another advanced, flamethrowers spewing torrents of fire that turned the courtyard into a furnace. Daniel tackled him, blade flashing. The fight was brutal, hand to hand, fueled by desperation. When it ended, Daniel was on his knees, panting, blood, his and theirs staining the stone. He looked up. The humans were forcing their way deeper into the citadel. Toward her, he staggered into the throne chamber, lungs burning. The scene froze him in place. The humans had broken through. Smoke curled through the high arches. The air stank of plasma and ash. Lysara stood defiantly before her throne, Elira clinging to her gown, as armored Marines advanced with weapons raised. Their leader stepped forward, helmet retracting to reveal a scarred face Daniel knew all too well. Captain Rourke, his commander, his mentor. Reeves, Rourke barked, voice echoing. Step aside. Don't make me put you down. Daniel's stomach knotted. Memories flashed. Training drills in Nevada, missions on forgotten colonies, nights drinking under alien skies. Rourke had been the closest thing to family he had left. But then Daniel saw Lysara, her daughter, trembling in her arms. He saw the fear in their luminous eyes, the same fear he had seen once before, the night he carried Elira through smoke and fire. He raised his rifle. Not this time. The Marines hesitated. Rourke's expression darkened. You're a soldier of Earth. Don't throw your life away for them. Daniel's voice cracked, but his aim did not waver. I'm not throwing it away. I'm finally fighting for something that matters. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then Rourke gave the order. The chamber erupted in fire. The battle was chaos. Karani soldiers poured in, clashing with armored Marines in a storm of plasma and steel. Energy blades hissed, carving arcs of light. Rifles blazed. The throne hall became a furnace of war. Daniel fought like a man possessed, shielding Lysara and Elira with his own body. He took hits, searing burns across his shoulder, a gash at his side, but he refused to fall. At one point, a Marine broke through the line, weapon aimed directly at Lysara. Daniel threw himself into the path, tackling the soldier, wrestling in the smoke. The fight ended with Daniel driving his blade into the man's chest, sparks exploding as armor failed. Lysara caught his gaze in that moment. Her face was streaked with ash, her gown torn, but her eyes, those pale, luminous eyes, were unshaken. She raised her hand, summoning a surge of energy that blasted 3 Marines across the hall in a wave of white fire. For the first time, Daniel saw her not just as a queen, but as a warrior, and he realized they were in this together. The fighting dragged on until dawn's first light filtered through the shattered ceiling. Smoke choked the chamber. Bodies, human and Karani alike, lay scattered across the marble floor. Captain Rourke stood wounded but unbroken, rifle aimed at Lysara. Daniel, bleeding and staggering, threw himself between them once more. Move, Reeves, Rourke snarled. Daniel shook his head. If you want her, you'll have to kill me first. Rourke hesitated, rage and regret flickering across his face. For a heartbeat, it seemed he might lower his weapon. But then the choice was made. The shot rang out. The shot echoed through the throne hall, shattering what remained of its ancient majesty. For a heartbeat, the world slowed. Dust drifted in golden shafts of dawn. Sparks hissed from broken glyphs. Daniel staggered, chest burning. He braced for the impact, expecting to fall into darkness. Yet the pain was not his. The soldier behind him crumpled, chest plate blown open by a blast of white fire. Lysara stood with her arm outstretched, her eyes blazing with fury, wisps of energy curling from her fingers like smoke. Rourke's head snapped toward her, disbelief etched into his scarred features. But before he could react, Karani reinforcements surged into the hall, driving back the remaining Marines. The tide had turned. The humans retreated, dragging their wounded, their dropships screaming into the pale sky. Silence fell. Daniel dropped to his knees, blood streaming from his side. The pain he had ignored until now threatened to consume him. He felt the cold floor beneath his palms, felt his vision blur, and then gentle hands steadied him. "Stay with me," Lysara whispered, her voice breaking for the first time since the war began. Her touch burned with warmth against his clammy skin. Elira pressed close to her mother's gown, her wide eyes fixed on the man who had saved her life, twice. Daniel tried to smile. "Guess we won." His voice rasped, a ghost of strength. Lysara leaned closer, her white hair falling around them like a curtain of light. "We survived. That is not the same as winning." The days that followed blurred together in fire and ash. The citadel was broken, but not fallen. Towers that had stood for millennia now lay in ruin. But within those ruins, the Karani still breathed. They carried their dead with dignity, whispering old songs as they laid them beneath shattered arches. Daniel remained confined to a chamber that once belonged to a noble long dead. His wounds were deep, plasma burns, broken ribs, a blade that had nearly pierced his lung. But Karani healers worked tirelessly, weaving alien medicine with human grit. Slowly, painfully he mended. Lysara visited often. At first, she came as queen, checking on the man who had stood between her daughter and death. But as the hours stretched into nights, she stayed longer. Sometimes she brought Elira, who would curl at Daniel's bedside and fall asleep listening to his quiet stories of Earth, the forests of Oregon, the lights of New York, the deserts that stretched forever under blue skies. Other times, Lysara came alone. They spoke in whispers about the burden of leadership, about loss, about the strange thread that tied two souls from different worlds. Daniel saw past her crown and her luminous aura. He saw the woman, weary but unyielding. And she saw past his scars and blood. She saw the man who had chosen them over his own people. But not everything was peace. The Karani whispered in the corridors. Some called Daniel a savior. Others called him a curse. He was the human who had brought war to their gates, the human who had killed his own kind. Lysara heard these whispers, but she did not waver. One evening, as twilight bled violet across the alien sky, she stood on the balcony beside him. The horizon was littered with smoke, but beyond it, the stars burned unbroken. "They will never forget this day," she said softly. "Not the loss, not the victory, and not you." Daniel leaned against the carved stone, still weak but strong enough to stand beside her. "What do you tell them?" "The truth," she answered, her pale eyes catching the starlight. "That without you, my daughter will be dead. That without you, I will be dead. That sometimes fate ties lives together for reasons beyond our understanding." He looked at her then, really looked. Her white hair stirred in the evening wind. The scars of battle lined her gown. And yet, she was radiant. "Back on Earth," he murmured, "they'll call me a traitor, a deserter, maybe even worse." Lysara turned to him fully, her hand brushing against his unbandaged arm. The touch sent a shiver through him, more powerful than any wound. "Here, you are no traitor. Here you are ours." The reconstruction began. The Karani worked tirelessly, stone by stone, to raise their citadel again. Daniel walked among them, lending what strength he could, though every step left him aching. Children stared at him with wide eyes. Soldiers nodded curtly, some with respect, some with suspicion. Elira often ran ahead of him, her laughter echoing through broken halls. She carried with her a small charm he had carved from the wreckage of a Marine's dog tag. To her, it was not a reminder of war, but a symbol of survival. And Lysara, she was everywhere, commanding her people, comforting her daughter, standing tall in the ashes of her throne. Yet always, somehow, finding a moment to return to him. One night, beneath the broken dome of the great hall, they sat together in silence. The stars spilled through the cracks above, a sea of fireflies against black. Daniel's voice was low. I don't know what comes next. Earth won't stop. They'll regroup. They'll come again. Lysara's gaze was steady. Then we will face them together. For the first time since the battle, he let himself believe it. The scars of war would never fade. On the Citadel, on the Karani, on Daniel himself. But in the quiet moments, in the laughter of a child, in the shared silence beneath alien stars, there was something more. Not just survival. Hope. The fires dimmed, the ruins cooled, and life began again. Yet for Daniel, every morning was still a reckoning. He woke to alien skies, violet dawns that spilled over jagged towers, the air carrying the faint hum of energy fields being restored. The war had scarred this planet, but hadn't killed it. Somehow, it reminded him of Earth after a storm, battered but alive. Sometimes, though, he wondered if he belonged here at all. The Karani people carried on with quiet strength, but every glance toward him was heavy. Some eyes were grateful, others resentful. He had saved their princess, defended their queen, fought side by side, but he was still human, still the face of the soldiers who had burned their homes. One afternoon, Daniel sat alone on the steps of the half-collapsed amphitheater, staring at the alien constellations that glimmered even before dusk. His thoughts wandered, torn between the memory of Earth and the fragile sense of belonging here. You are troubled, came Lysara's voice behind him. He didn't turn immediately. He knew her presence by the subtle shift of air, by the soft shimmer of light that seemed to follow her. When he finally looked, her white hair caught the dim glow like strands of starlight. I was just thinking, Daniel said quietly, about home. Her expression softened, though her crown of duty never slipped. You miss your world. I miss parts of it, he admitted. The smell of rain on asphalt, the sound of cicadas in summer. Things that don't matter to anyone but me. But Earth isn't home anymore. Not after this. She stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his. Then perhaps home is not where you were born. Perhaps it is where you are needed. The words struck deeper than he expected. He lowered his eyes, exhaling slowly. Needed. Yeah, but do they want me here? A silence stretched, filled with distant voices of workers rebuilding the citadel. Then Lysara lowered herself beside him, folding her gown around her like flowing silver. Some doubt you, she admitted. Some fear you. But all of them know this. Without you, we would have lost everything. He glanced sideways at her. And what about you? For a heartbeat, the queen's mask faltered. The woman beneath it, grieving, resilient, alive, looked at him with nothing hidden. I know what you are, Daniel. I know the weight you carry. And still, I want you here. The words lingered between them, fragile and immense. He had no answer, not yet. But for the first time, the question of belonging felt less like a burden and more like a choice. Days bled into weeks. The Karani rebuilt not only their walls but their traditions. Rituals were performed to honor the fallen. Songs were sung in twilight to weave strength into the living. Daniel watched, learning, absorbing. He noticed how Elira clung to him as much as she did to her mother, how she asked him endless questions about Earth, questions about trees, oceans, and animals she could hardly imagine. Her innocence was a balm in a world still aching. But the bond between him and Lysara deepened in quieter ways. It wasn't in grand gestures or declarations. It was in the way she sought his opinion during council debates, in the way she lingered at his side when she could have walked away, in the way her hand brushed against his when passing an object, deliberate or not. One evening, under the fractured dome, Daniel finally asked the question that haunted him. Why me? Lysara tilted her head, her pale eyes glimmering with unspoken things. Because you chose us, when you had every reason not to. Because you saw not enemies, but lives worth saving. And because, Daniel, she hesitated, her voice trembling in a way that no battlefield had ever managed to make it. Because you remind me that even in the darkest war, there can still be light. He swallowed hard, his chest tightening. The scars on his body throbbed, but it was nothing compared to the ache in his heart. He wanted to answer, but words failed. Instead, he placed his hand over hers. It was enough. But even as hope grew, shadows remained. Reports came of human fleets regrouping, of whispers that Earth would not accept defeat. Daniel knew it was only a matter of time before another war erupted. The fragile peace they had built was a seed planted in shallow soil. Still, he also knew something else. He was no longer a soldier fighting for orders he didn't believe in. He was a man who had chosen a people, a queen, a child, a new world. And for the first time, he didn't fear what came next. The reflective conclusion was not about closure. It was about acceptance, about scars that would never vanish, about choices that would shape the years to come. Daniel had lost one home, but found another. He had lost certainty, but gained purpose. As he stood with Lasara and Alira on the rebuilt balcony, the stars stretched infinite above them, the galaxy wide and merciless. But in that vastness, he was no longer adrift. He was where he was needed, where he was wanted, and perhaps, just perhaps, where he was loved. The citadel stood again, not as it once had, flawless and proud, but scarred and remade, its towers etched with the memory of war. The cracks in its walls glowed faintly with Qurani energy, no longer hidden, as if the city itself had chosen to wear its wounds openly. Months had passed since the final battle. The war had not ended. Whispers of human fleets still drifted across the stars. But here, on the world Daniel had bled for, life was moving forward. Daniel walked through the market square one morning, where stalls of crystal and woven metal had returned, filling the air with color and scent. The people watched him still, some with lingering suspicion, most with cautious acceptance. Children no longer shrank back at the sight of him. Some even ran past him with laughter, daring one another to touch the tall human's arm before darting away. He was no longer just the outsider. He was part of their story now. That night, under the rebuilt dome of the throne hall, a council gathered, not of war, but of future. Lasara stood at its center, her white hair cascading like a crown of light. Alira perched beside her, restless but radiant, the very embodiment of survival. Daniel stayed in the shadows at first, listening. The Qurani debated openly how to defend against future human incursions, how to strengthen alliances with other systems, how to preserve what was left of their culture. Then Lasara called his name. The chamber hushed. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. Daniel hesitated, then stepped forward, the weight of countless gazes pressing on his shoulders. "You all know who I am," he said, his voice steady. "You know what I've done, for my people, and for yours. Some of you hate me for it. Some of you trust me. But none of you can deny this. Earth will come again. They won't forgive this defeat. And when they return, it won't be with a handful of ships. It'll be with fire meant to erase you." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Daniel continued, "I can't stop that, but I can help you prepare. I know how they fight, how they think. I know their blind spots, their arrogance. If you'll have me, I'll stand with you when they come. Not as a soldier of Earth, not as an outsider, but as one of you." The silence stretched. Then a voice rose from the crowd. An elder, her skin marked with shimmering glyphs. "Then one of you shall be." The hall erupted in voices, some hesitant, others strong. But Daniel knew the tide had shifted. For the first time, he belonged not only by choice, but by acceptance. Weeks later, on the highest terrace of the citadel, Daniel stood beside Lasara as the twin moons rose. Their light painted the sky in silver and blue, washing over the city below. Alira slept within, her dreams untroubled for the first time in years. Lasara's voice was soft as the wind. "Do you ever regret it? The life you left behind?" Daniel's gaze lingered on the stars. Somewhere, Earth was out there, a place he would never see again. Sometimes. But then I remember what that life was. Orders. Lies. Killing because someone told me to. Here, I fight because it matters. She studied him, her eyes like pale fire. "And what matters most?" He turned, meeting her gaze fully. "You. Her. This world." For a moment, the weight of titles and war and history vanished. It was just Daniel and Lasara, two souls who had found one another in the ruins of a universe bent on tearing them apart. She reached for his hand. He took it. Years later, the story of a human soldier who had saved the alien princess became legend. Children recited it in songs. Elders spoke of it by firelight. The tale was told not as one of war, but of hope, that even in the darkest battles, connection could bloom. Daniel's scars never faded. Neither did Lasara's burdens. But together, they carried them. And when Earth's shadow returned, as it surely would, they would stand side by side, not as enemies divided by species, but as partners bound by choice. And so it ended, not with perfect peace, but with enduring strength. A soldier who found more than duty, a queen who found more than power, a people who found a reason to believe in tomorrow. And above them, the stars, cold, infinite, unyielding, looked down on a love that defied them all. Thank you for reading this journey to the end. If you've ever believed in impossible love, in courage stronger than fear, or in hope shining even in war, drop a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories like this. Because this isn't just a story, it's a reminder. Humanity shines brightest when we choose love.